Under the fading light of a small mountain town, the little girl whispered the simplest question. "Daddy, can I have that horse?" But the moment Officer Daniel Hayes looked at the thin, gray gelding standing by the trailer, his blood turned cold. Not because the horse was dangerous, nor because it was dying, but because Daniel recognized the scar burned into its neck. A mark, he thought, had been buried with a horrific case no one ever solved, until now. The sun over Redwood Springs hung low and hazy, turning the asphalt of the old strip mall parking lot into a wavering mirage. Officer Daniel Hayes walked beside his daughter, one hand resting near his duty belt out of habit, the other wrapped loosely around the handle of her new blue backpack. It was his first Saturday off in 3 weeks, and he'd promised Lily they'd grab burgers and new sneakers. Nothing dramatic, nothing bloody. Just a normal afternoon for once. The strip mall had seen better days. Faded signs peeled over the laundromat and the pawn shop, and a grand reopening banner over the dollar store fluttered like it had been there for years. Daniel's radio crackled quietly at his hip, turned low but never off. He scanned the lot out of reflex. Cars, kids hopping between parking spaces, a teenager leaning on a bike, a woman loading groceries into an old Chevy. Nothing out of place, nothing that looked like trouble. Lily skipped a half step ahead, her sneakers slapping the pavement. "Can we get a shake too?" she asked, glancing up at him with that hopeful smile he never quite knew how to refuse. Her dark blonde ponytail swung against the back of her hoodie, the sleeves pushed up to bony elbows. She looked like any other 10-year-old, but Daniel knew better. Kids who'd had someone walk out on them saw the world differently, even when they pretended not to. He was answering with a vague "we'll see" when he noticed the trailer. It sat crooked at the far edge of the lot, backed up near the cracked chain-link fence that separated the strip mall from a patch of scrubby field. The paint on its side was flaking away, streaked with old mud and something darker near the wheel well. In front of it, jammed into a plastic bucket filled with gravel, stood a piece of cardboard with black letters scrawled across it, 50 done for the problem horse. Daniel slowed without meaning to, something in his chest giving a small, uneasy twist. It wasn't the sign itself. People tried to sell all kinds of things out of this lot: lawnmowers, puppies, expired tools. It was the way the letters slanted, rushed and angry, as if the writer hadn't cared who read them, only that they were done. Lily followed his gaze, her steps faltering. "Problem horse," she murmured, frowning. "What does that mean?" Beside the trailer, half in shadow, stood the animal. A gray gelding, tall but gaunt, hips sharp under a dull, patchy coat that might once have shined like silver. His mane hung tangled along his neck, and one front leg rested gingerly, as if he'd learned to put weight on it only when he had no choice. But it wasn't the ribs or the limp that made Daniel's breath catch. It was the horse's eyes, dark, quiet, watching everything, like it had already seen too much. Lily's fingers slipped from the backpack handle and found his instead. She didn't speak at first. The world around them, the blare of a car horn, the rattle of a shopping cart, a kid shouting for his mom, seemed to fade into background noise. The gray horse flicked an ear, the rope at his halter tied loosely to the trailer latch, but he didn't shy away. He just stood there and breathed, as if each breath was an effort he decided was still worth making. The man leaning against the trailer straightened when he saw Daniel looking. He wore a faded plaid shirt and a ball cap stained with sweat, boots scuffed white at the toes. His beard was more stubble than shape, and his eyes stayed half-lidded, like a man who'd made too many bargains in parking lots just like this. "Afternoon, officer," he called, spotting the badge clipped at Daniel's belt even out of uniform. "You looking for a deal?" Daniel recognized him in that vague way. Small-town cops recognized half the county. Travis Cole. Not a major problem, but never far from gossip, late payments, loud fights, the kind of guy whose name popped up in old reports without ever quite making it to a courtroom. "Just out with my kid," Daniel replied, keeping his tone mild. "Didn't know we were having a livestock auction today." He meant it as a joke, but it landed flat even to his own ears. Travis shrugged, thumb hooking under his belt. "He's gotta go," he said, jerking his chin toward the horse. "Can't feed what don't pull its weight. $50 and he's yours. Less than a tank of gas, officer. You won't find a cheaper headache anywhere." He chuckled once at his own line, but there was no humor in it, just something dry and used up. The horse flicked his tail, shifting his weight as if the words themselves weighed on him. Lily released her father's hand and took a tentative step forward. "Daddy," she whispered, the word barely making it past her throat. Daniel opened his mouth to tell her to stay back. Strange animal, unknown history, all the reasons he'd learned the hard way. But before he could, the horse turned his head, slow and deliberate, and met Lily's eyes. That was when Daniel saw it. The faint, burned-in brand high on the gelding's neck, half hidden under tangled grey hair. The mark was small, no bigger than his palm, a stylized canyon carved into a circle of scar tissue. Daniel's vision narrowed around it. For a heartbeat, he wasn't standing in a shabby parking lot anymore. He was back on the side of Highway 16, rain hammering the hood of his cruiser, red and blue lights bouncing off twisted metal, a horse trailer on its side, and a young woman's body under a sheet. In an old file still shoved in his desk, in ink he'd tried to forget, a name waited: Red Canyon Ranch, Case 17B. Something icy slid down his spine, a cold that had nothing to do with the breeze sweeping across the lot. The air tasted metallic, like it had that night. He knew that brand. He'd seen it in photographs attached to a case they never closed, a case that got shuffled under insufficient evidence and no further leads. He had told himself more than once that there was nothing he could have done. Looking at the horse now, ribs showing under filthy hair, that lie felt thin. Lily glanced back at him, eyes wide, not fully understanding, but sensing the shift in him, like kids always did. "Daddy," she said again, softer than before, "can I have that horse?" The question hung between them, absurd and fragile, and somehow heavier than any arrest he'd made in 10 years. The horse's ears tipped forward, and Daniel could feel Travis watching him, waiting to see which part of him would answer. The cautious cop, or the man who still woke up at night thinking about rain on twisted steel. Daniel didn't answer right away. The world narrowed to the sound of his own breathing and the feel of Lily's eyes on him. Somewhere behind them, a car door slammed, and a kid laughed too loud, but it all felt distant. He saw the brand again, stark against tired gray hide, and for a split second he hated himself for recognizing it. Fate had a cruel way of circling back when you least wanted it to. He forced his shoulders to relax, schooling his face back into something calm. "We don't know anything about this horse," he said quietly, more to buy time than anything else. "He could be mean, could be sick." The words tasted reasonable, adult, safe. Lily's fingers twisted in the hem of her hoodie. "He doesn't look mean," she whispered. "He just looks done." Travis pushed off the trailer with one boot, sensing the crack in Daniel's resolve. "He ain't bit anybody," the man said. "Just stubborn. Won't load, won't pull, won't do much of anything these days. I got mouths to feed that actually earn their keep." He jerked his chin toward the horse again. 50, cash, and you're doing us both a favor." There was a hard edge under the easy drawl, a man eager to be rid of a problem. Daniel looked from Travis to the horse and back. Years of training lined up in his head like bullet points. Don't make decisions on emotion. Don't bring unknown risk into your home. Don't mix your kid with someone else's mess. Then another list rose up behind it, faces of people he couldn't help, cases that never got solved, that driver on Highway 16 who died staring at a ceiling of flashing lights. How many times had he told himself, "There was nothing more you could do"? "Sir?" A cracked voice drifted from near the corner of the laundromat. An older man in a worn army jacket stood there, clutching a plastic grocery bag. Daniel recognized him vaguely. Earl, a regular loiterer, mostly harmless. Earl shuffled closer, eyes on the horse. "That brand," he muttered. "You know what that is, don't you, officer?" Daniel met his gaze, a silent conversation passing between two men who'd seen too much. He gave the slightest nod. Earl's mouth tightened. "My brother worked near Red Canyon," he said under his breath. "Good folks didn't last long around that place. Horses didn't either." Travis shot him a sharp look. "Mind your business, Earl," he snapped. "You want to buy hay burners? You can line 'em up in your own yard." The tension hung there, thin as a wire. Lily didn't understand the history, but she understood fear when she felt it. Her hand slid back into her father's. Daniel squeezed her fingers, as much to steady himself as to steady her. He thought about their little rental house on the edge of town, the sagging fence, the empty patch of dirt where an old barn used to stand. He thought about child support checks that never came, about overtime shifts, about vet bills he could already feel forming like storm clouds. "Daddy," Lily said softly, tilting her head toward the horse, "if we walk away, where does he go?" The question cut cleaner than any argument. Travis shrugged, unbothered. "Auction, if I can get him on the trailer," he said. "If not, there's other ways." He didn't explain, didn't have to. Daniel had been a cop long enough to fill in the blanks. He felt something in him harden, that old, stubborn part that refused to stand by when someone weaker was backed into a corner. Maybe he couldn't fix Red Canyon. Maybe he couldn't rewrite Case 17B. But he could decide what happened to this one life in front of him. He reached for his wallet, the leather warm from his pocket. 50, he said, pulling out the bills, "and you hand me whatever paperwork you've got on him." Travis's eyes flicked to the money, then to Daniel's face, weighing how far he could push. "Paperwork's thin," he said. "He's changed hands a few times, but I'll write you a bill of sale." Daniel held his stare a second longer, making it clear that was not a suggestion. The tension broke when Travis snatched the cash. Lily let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She stepped closer to the horse, slow as a prayer. "Hey, buddy," she murmured, offering her hand. The grey gelding lowered his head with a weary kind of grace, nostrils flaring as he drew in her scent. For a brief, suspended moment, Daniel watched his daughter's small fingers disappear against the rough velvet of the horse's muzzle, and something in his chest unclenched just a little. Maybe this wasn't a smart decision. Maybe it was simply the right one. Loading him turned out easier than Travis had claimed. With a little coaxing and Lily's soft voice at his shoulder, the horse stepped up into Daniel's borrowed stock trailer like he'd been doing it his whole life. No fight, no rear, just a resigned acceptance that somehow hurt worse to watch. Earl shuffled back toward the laundromat, giving Daniel a small, almost respectful nod. "Name him something good," the old man called quietly. "He's earned it." The drive home followed the two-lane road out of town, past rusted mailboxes and stretches of brown pasture reaching toward low hills. In the rearview mirror, Daniel kept catching glimpses of a gray ear, the faint shadow of a head as the trailer swayed. Lily twisted in her seat to peek out the back window every few seconds, too wired to sit still. "Do you think he knows," she asked, "that he's not going back there?" Daniel stared at the road ahead. "Horses remember more than we give them credit for," he said. Their house sat at the end of a gravel lane, a modest single story with peeling white paint and a porch that creaked under its own memories. Behind it, the remains of an old paddock leaned against a scraggly windbreak of cottonwoods, the weathered boards silvered by years of sun and snow. Daniel had always meant to tear it down, but now, as he backed the trailer toward it, he felt strangely grateful for every wonky post that still stood. Maybe some things waited on purpose. They opened the gate with a groan and let the gray step out into the dusty enclosure. He walked a slow circle, testing the ground, ears turning, eyes cataloging this new world. Lily leaned against the fence, chin on her folded arms, watching as if a miracle might happen at any second. Daniel stood a few feet back, hands on his hips, feeling the weight of what he'd just invited into their lives. When the horse finally stopped and looked back at them, the evening light caught his brand again, and Daniel's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a rescue. It was the start of something he couldn't quite name yet. Morning slid into the Hayes place on quiet feet. The first light found Daniel standing at the kitchen sink, coffee cooling in his hand, as he watched the gray horse through the window. Dew clung to the sparse grass in the paddock, turning each blade into a pin of glass. The gelding stood near the far fence, head low, as if he'd learned not to expect much from a new day. Lily appeared beside him, still in her sleep shirt, hair trying to escape its braid. She pressed her palms to the glass. "He needs a name," she said, eyes never leaving the horse. "We can't just call him Hey You forever." Daniel took a sip of coffee, buying himself a second. Naming meant keeping. Keeping meant everything that came with it. "Got any ideas?" he asked. Lily's brow furrowed in serious thought. "He looks like he's been everywhere," she decided. "Like he's seen things." "What about Ranger? Like the park rangers who don't quit just because the weather's bad." She glanced up, testing his reaction. The name settled in Daniel's chest with a strange, fitting weight. "Ranger," he repeated. "Yeah, that tracks." They went out together with a flake of hay, and a bucket of water bright enough to show the morning sky. Up close in daylight, Ranger looked worse and better all at once. His coat was a map of neglect, matted in places, rubbed raw in others, but there was a steadiness in the way he stood, like a soldier trying not to lean on an old wound. Daniel ran a hand down the gelding's neck and felt the raised edges of the brand beneath his fingers. "Is that from his old home?" Lily asked, watching his face. "Something like that," Daniel said softly. "It's a mark from a ranch. They do it so folks know where the horse came from." He didn't explain the rest, the reports of broken stock, the complaints that went nowhere. Some truths were too sharp for a 10-year-old at 8 in the morning. "We'll get Maria to take a look at him later. Make sure he's not hiding anything we can't see." Dr. Maria Lopez pulled her dusty SUV into the lane just after lunch, the kind of woman who brought her own coffee mug and never forgot a pair of gloves. She'd worked cattle and barrel horses across 3 counties before switching mostly to small animals, but Daniel knew she still made time for cases that didn't fit in a waiting room. She walked to the paddock with an easy, practiced calm that seemed to settle even the wind. Ranger watched her approach, ears flicking, but he didn't shy away when she laid a hand on his shoulder. "Hey, big guy," she murmured, fingers tracing along bones that should have had more cover. She checked his teeth, his eyes, the way he bore weight on each leg. Up close, she could see the story his skin tried to tell. Thin, white lines of healed cuts, round scars that looked too deliberate to be accidents. "He's tougher than he looks," she said finally, "but he's been through it." Maria's hand paused at his neck near the brand. Her eyes narrowed. "You know where this comes from?" she asked quietly. Daniel's jaw flexed. "I've got an idea," he said. "Nothing I can take to court, not yet." Maria nodded, reading more in his tone than he said out loud. "Well, he's sound enough to enjoy some peace," she added. "Limp's old. Pain's there, but manageable. What he needs now is time, groceries, and not to be hit again." They spent the afternoon cleaning what they could. Lily brushed out tangles with careful strokes, while Daniel hammered a broken fence board back into place. Every now and then Ranger would lift his head, listening to a sound only he seemed to hear. A truck changing gears in the distance, the clatter of a neighbor's trailer hitch. He'd tense, muscles going hard under skin, then slowly let it go when nothing came of it. Daniel filed that away in the same quiet drawer where he kept the brand. Night settled over the house like a heavy blanket. By 10, the small place was tucked into its routines, dishes drying in the rack, TV off, Lily already breathing slow behind her bedroom door. Daniel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to old boards creak with the cooling of the day. Somewhere outside, a freight train moaned far off, a sound he usually found oddly comforting. Tonight it just sounded like something big passing him by. He must have drifted, because when he woke, the room was different. The dark felt thicker, the way it did just before a storm. At first he thought it was a dream, some leftover echo of Highway 16, rain on steel. Then he heard it, a sharp, steady thud from the backyard, not loud, but insistent, hoof against wood, hoof against earth, over and over, too deliberate to ignore. He sat up, heart climbing toward his throat. Daniel swung his legs out of bed and reached automatically for the flashlight on his nightstand. The digital clock glowed 2:11 a.m. in accusing green. He padded down the hallway, pausing outside Lily's door just long enough to hear her soft snore. The sound grounded him, reminded him what mattered. Then he moved on, through the living room, to the back door where a slice of moonlight cut across the floor. The hoofbeats grew clearer, paced like a message. When he stepped onto the porch, the night hit him cool and damp. The sky over Redwood Springs was a deep, bruised blue, clouds dragging low. In the paddock, Ranger was not the quiet, resigned horse from earlier. He trotted the fence line with a short, uneven gait, head high, tail switching, stopping every few strides to slam a front hoof into the packed earth near the gate. His ears were locked toward the tree line beyond the yard, body pointed like an arrow at something unseen. "Easy, boy," Daniel called softly, crossing the yard. Ranger swung his head toward him, eyes bright in the thin light, then back to the trees, as if urging him to look, to follow. Daniel slipped through the gate and laid a hand on the rope halter. The gelding's skin trembled under his palm, not with fear exactly, but with a kind of wild alertness he recognized from men on patrol. Something was out there, or had been. For a long moment, man and horse stood in the hush, listening. The usual night sounds, crickets, a dog down the road, the occasional semi-humming along the highway, faded into a low, distant wash. What Daniel noticed instead was the gap, a pocket of silence hanging over the dark line of cottonwoods. No wind, no leaves moving, just a waiting stillness that made the small hairs on his arms stand up. The last time he'd felt that was the night of the wreck. Ranger stamped again, more urgent now, then pulled slightly against the lead, not in panic, but in insistence. Daniel's training screamed at him to stay put, call it in, rationalize the feeling away as dreams and memories. But another voice, older and quieter, reminded him that ignoring a hunch had cost him dearly once. Tightened his grip on the flashlight, unlatched the paddock gate, and let Ranger guide him toward the trees, into whatever the night was trying to show them. The trail beyond the cottonwoods felt older than the town itself, a narrow cut of earth shaped by decades of storms and hooves. Daniel walked beside Ranger, the beam of his flashlight brushing over low branches and damp soil. Each step stirred a memory he'd spent years burying. Somehow, the night felt like it already knew his name. They reached the spot where the trees opened into a shallow clearing. Daniel had been there once before, years back after the wreck, when search crews combed the area for debris. Ranger stopped at the edge, his breathing hard and uneven. The gelding's ears flicked forward, then pinned back, as if the past had suddenly stepped out of the dark. A rusted metal panel lay half-buried in weeds, its edges chewed up by time. Daniel knelt, brushing away the dirt until the letters appeared, red CA. The rest worn to ghosts. It matched the old photos in the case file almost exactly. Ranger lowered his head, nostrils flaring over the metal, the way a soldier might salute the place where he'd fallen. Daniel stood slowly, the night pressing against him. "What did they do to you out here?" he whispered. The trees answered only with their long, steady hush. For a moment, he let himself imagine the scene. Trailers backing in under cover of dark, ropes tightened, hooves slipping on wet ground. The kind of work done by hands that didn't care who suffered under them. A sudden crunch behind him made him turn fast, flashlight slicing across the clearing. A boy stepped from the shadows, hands raised, breathing sharp like he'd been running. 17, maybe younger, with a cheap jacket and grief written into the set of his shoulders. "Don't shoot," he said, voice cracking. "I'm not here to cause trouble." Daniel recognized him after a heartbeat. Logan Reed, the older brother of the girl who died in the canyon wreck. A kid who'd stared at officers with a look that said he'd never forgive any of them. Now Logan kept his distance, eyes flicking toward Ranger as if he were seeing a ghost. "That's him," the boy whispered. "The gray. I knew it." Daniel steadied his breath. "You've seen this horse before?" Logan nodded, swallowing hard. "The night my sister crashed. I saw a horse trying to pull her door open, gray like that. Same eyes. They dragged him into a trailer afterward. I tried to tell someone, but nobody cared. They said I imagined it." His voice trembled, anger braided with old hurt. Ranger stepped forward, slow and deliberate, lowering his head toward the boy. Logan stiffened, then eased when the gelding brushed his nose gently against his sleeve. It was a soft, deliberate touch, one that didn't belong to a dangerous animal at all, but something wiser, older, carrying its own memories of that night. Daniel felt the scene, settled deep inside him. "The ranch that owned him shut down," Logan said quietly. "But the people didn't. They changed the name, moved stock in the dock. My uncle said horses that didn't perform were sent off somewhere else. Nobody asks questions when money's involved." The wind picked up, carrying the faint smell of distant rain. Ranger's ears twitched uneasily. Daniel looked around the clearing again, seeing not weeds and rust, but the outline of something larger. An operation that hadn't really died, just moved its fence posts deeper into the shadows. It explained too much. The brand, the scars, the way Ranger reacted to trailers at night. He wasn't a runaway. He was a witness, maybe even a survivor. "We need proof," Daniel said, more to himself than to Logan. "Something the sheriff can't ignore." Logan kicked at the dirt. "Proof is why I came. Trucks still come through here. I hear them late. They move slow, like they're hauling something heavy. If you follow the road behind the ridge, it'll take you right to their new place. Folks call it Willow Ridge now." Ranger lifted his head suddenly, muscles bunching beneath his skin. Somewhere beyond the clearing, a branch snapped, sharp, deliberate, too heavy to be just wind. Daniel's hand moved to his holster out of instinct, tension thickening the air, but the sound faded into nothing, swallowed by the dark. Logan shivered. "They watch this place. You can't stay long." Daniel exhaled, steady but shaken. He placed a hand on the gelding's neck, feeling the faint tremor of old fear beneath new strength. "Let's get out of here," he murmured. Ranger turned willingly, guiding them back toward the trail. As they walked, Daniel glanced over his shoulder one last time. The clearing stood still and empty, but he could feel eyes in the dark, like the past wasn't done with him yet. Ranger walked closer to him on the way home, head low, as if spent from dredging up memories no animal should have carried alone. Daniel didn't speak, didn't try to make sense of the weight settling into his chest. He only knew one thing for certain. They had crossed a line tonight, and whatever waited at Willow Ridge, it wasn't going to let them walk away quietly. The next few days drifted by in a strange kind of hush, the kind that settles when a truth has been stirred but hasn't yet risen to the surface. Daniel carried the weight of the clearing with him, tucked under his ribs like something bruised. Ranger stayed close to the fence, watching the road beyond their trees, as if expecting someone or something to return. On Thursday evening, Daniel prepped for a late patrol, the kind of quiet shift usually filled with traffic stops and noise complaints. Lily hovered near the door, her jacket half-zipped. "You'll be safe, right?" she asked, voice light but eyes worried. He knelt, smoothing a stray hair behind her ear. "Always," he said, even, though part of him knew that wasn't true anymore. He didn't notice her slipping out after him, didn't hear the soft roll of her bike wheels 3 minutes later. Lily followed at a distance, keeping to the sidewalk shadows the way she'd seen kids in movies do. She didn't know exactly why she felt she needed to go. Only that Ranger had been restless, and her dad had been quieter than usual, and those things together felt like danger wearing her family's name. Daniel parked near the trail that cut under the old highway bridge. It was a spot teenagers used at night, littered with beer cans and cigarette ends, nothing usually worth more than a warning. He walked the perimeter with his flashlight, sweeping slow arcs, the beam catching patches of broken concrete and faded graffiti. Everything seemed calm enough, but something in the wind made him pause. A thin sound drifted from beneath the bridge, soft, trembling, almost too quiet to trust. A whimper, like something small trying not to cry. Daniel followed it down the embankment, boots sliding on loose gravel. The darkness under the bridge felt thick, cool, the kind of stillness that made sound carry farther than it should. He swept the light forward and saw a shiver move in the shadows. Lily had reached the trail by then. She laid her bike down carefully, heart pounding as she crept closer. She saw the glow of her father's flashlight first, then heard him murmur something low and steady. When she got close enough to see, her breath caught. Huddled against a fallen crate was a tiny horse, no bigger than a large dog, its coat patchy with mud, ribs sharp as fingers pressing from inside. Daniel knelt beside the foal, his movements deliberate. The animal flinched when the light touched its side, lifting its head just enough for Lily to see one swollen eye blinking against the glare. A rope cut into its hind leg, frayed but tight, like it had been dragged or tied where no one would look. "Easy, little one," Daniel whispered, reaching for the knot with careful fingers. The foal quivered, too weak to fight, too tired to do more than breathe in shallow, aching waves. Lily lowered herself beside her father, her voice barely a thread. "Daddy, is it going to die?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Not if we can help it." He worked the rope loose, feeling the raw heat of infection beneath the soaked fur. Whoever tied this knot had meant for the foal to stay hidden, or to never be found at all. Once free, the foal shifted, trying to stand, but its legs buckled immediately. Lily shrugged off her jacket and wrapped it around the trembling body, pulling the small creature close. "You're okay," she murmured, repeating the same words she told Ranger on that first day. The foal's breathing eased just a little, as though her voice alone had taken a weight off its chest. Daniel exhaled slowly, scanning the shadows under the bridge. Tire marks carved into the dirt told a story he wished he didn't recognize. Heavy tread, recent, the same pattern he'd seen near the clearing and the old ranch road. Someone had dropped this foal off as easily as someone tossing a broken tool. And that someone was getting bolder. They loaded the foal into the back seat of the cruiser, laying it across blankets Daniel kept for winter emergencies. Lily sat beside the tiny horse, her hands gentle on its neck. "We should call him Star," she said quietly. "He needs a name that makes him feel stronger." Daniel managed a tired smile. "Star it is." Naming meant keeping. Keeping meant more danger. But he didn't say no. Ranger whinnied the moment they pulled into the driveway, a sharp, urgent call that echoed through the yard. When Daniel opened the cruiser door, the gray gelding stepped to the fence, ears sharply forward. His body stiffened when he saw the foal. Something old sparking behind his eyes, recognition, or memory, or fear, wearing a familiar mask. He paced the fence line until Daniel carried Star into the barn, his hooves thudding like warnings. Lily walked beside him, whispering promises to a creature that didn't yet understand them. In the pale light of the barn, Daniel finally let the truth settle. Ranger hadn't led him into darkness by accident. And now, with Star trembling on a pile of old hay, he knew the threads of the past were tightening again, pulling all of them toward something waiting just beyond the ridge. By Sunday afternoon, the Hayes property felt different, like the air itself had begun listening. Ranger paced the fence with a restlessness Daniel hadn't seen before, pausing every so often to look toward the distant ridge. Star slept in the makeshift stall Maria set up, her hands gentle as she checked the foal's wound. "He's lucky you found him," she murmured. "Or unlucky someone wanted him gone." Daniel leaned against the barn doorway, arms crossed as he watched Ranger. The gelding's gaze kept drifting toward the road, ears pricking whenever an engine rumbled past. "He's expecting someone," Maria said softly, following his eyes. "It's not fear, it's memory." Daniel nodded, that same tightness coiling in his chest. Ranger wasn't just reacting, he was remembering. Later that evening, Daniel drove into town to pick up feed. The store's parking lot hummed with low conversation, an ordinary Sunday bustle. But near the back, Logan Reed waited, leaning against his beat-up truck. "Got something," Logan said as Daniel approached. "Been watching that ridge like you said. Trucks go in after dark real slow. Same model that was near the canyon the night my sister died." Logan pulled out his phone and showed blurry photos, headlights angled down a dirt road, the familiar white trailer behind them. Daniel felt the bottom of his stomach drop. The license plate wasn't clear, but the paint pattern was unmistakable. He'd written that description in more than one report years ago. "Where does that road go now?" he asked quietly. Logan didn't look away. "Willow Ridge." The name sat heavy in the air. Willow Ridge used to be a quiet ranch on the other side of the county, but it changed hands fast, the kind of fast that left paperwork smudged and old neighbors uneasy. Rumors said the new owners worked stock off the books. Daniel had shrugged that off once. He couldn't shrug now, not with Ranger pacing and Star barely alive. Back home, Ranger stood at the gate when Daniel returned, his hooves planted like a guard posted on duty. The gelding watched him walk up the drive, eyes sharp despite the evening shadows. Lily hurried out of the barn, her cheeks flushed with worry. "He won't calm down," she said. "Every time a truck passes, he stops whatever he's doing and listens like he's counting." Daniel knelt beside the horse, pressing a palm to Ranger's neck. The gelding trembled at first touch, then eased, leaning just slightly against his hand. "He knows that sound," Daniel whispered. "He knows exactly who used to come for him." Ranger snorted, the sound sharp and haunted, then looked toward the ridge again with a flick of his ear. Maria watched from the doorway, her face pale. "We can't let this go," she said. "Whatever's happening out there, it didn't end when the old ranch closed." Daniel sighed, a long, weary sound pulled from someplace deep. "I know, but we need more than suspicion." Maria stepped closer. "Then let's get it. Logan's willing, I'm willing, and Ranger," her voice softened, "he's giving you the map." Night fell heavy over Redwood Springs, a blanket of dark stitched with the hum of distant semis on the highway. Daniel sat at the kitchen table with old files spread around him, case notes, photos, fragments that had once felt meaningless. Now, under the warm lamp glow, they shifted, connecting like pieces of a puzzle he finally had the right angle to see. The same brand showed up again and again. The same trailer model. The same pattern of missing livestock. A soft thud reached the window, then another. Ranger bumped the fence with his chest, a low rumble in his throat. Daniel stepped onto the porch and saw headlights curl along the highway curve. An older white truck towing a trailer, moving slow, steady, like someone who traveled this road enough times to never rush. Ranger's ears pinned, muscles stiffening. Recognition flashed through him like lightning. Daniel watched the truck disappear toward the ridge road. "It's them," he murmured. "It has to be." Behind him, Lily appeared at the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. "Are you going after them?" she asked. The moon cast her small frame in silver, making her look braver than she felt. Daniel touched her cheek gently. "Not tonight," he said, "but soon." Back in the barn, Star lifted his head weakly when Ranger returned. The gray gelding lowered his muzzle to the foal's flank, breathing slow and steady, as if reminding him the night wasn't as dangerous as it felt. Daniel watched them from the shadows, something breaking open inside him. Ranger wasn't just pacing from fear. He was guarding. As the house settled into quiet, Daniel made his decision. He grabbed his notebook, car keys, and a flashlight worn smooth by years of use. Ranger followed him to the gate, lifting his head high in the stillness. "Tomorrow," Daniel whispered. "We followed the ridge tomorrow." The gelding blinked once, steady and solemn, like he understood every word. And as Daniel walked back inside, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the mountains, a distant warning from a storm not yet visible, but already forming. Somewhere out at Willow Ridge, engines cooled, ropes hung ready, and men who thought they'd never be caught closed their doors for the night. They had no idea a gray horse had begun to lead a man straight to them. The storm rolled in before sundown, carried on a cold wind that rattled the eaves of the Hayes house. Clouds stacked low over the mountains, turning the sky the color of bruised steel. Daniel stood on the porch, watching lightning spider across the horizon. It felt fitting somehow, like the night had decided to match the weight settling in his chest. Inside, Lily moved with a nervous energy that didn't match her small frame. She tried to help Maria with Star, but her hands shook when she held the bucket, and Maria noticed. "It's all right to be scared," she said gently. Lily bit her lip. "I'm not scared," she whispered, though her voice betrayed her. "I just don't want Dad going alone." Daniel strapped on his duty belt with the same ritual he used before tense call. Slow, deliberate, each piece settled where it belonged. Sheriff Nora Grant pulled into the driveway just as the rain began to fall, wipers thumping like a heartbeat. She stepped out, face set in firm lines. "Warrant came through," she said. "Small team, quiet entry, You ready? Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. Ranger pawed the ground near the gate, nostrils flaring at the scent of distant thunder. He paced in tight circles, the kind of anxious movement that spoke of memory, not fear. Lily clutched his halter, leaning her cheek against his neck. Please keep him safe, she murmured. Ranger lifted his head as if answering her, then looked toward the ridge again, with unwavering focus. Daniel hesitated when he saw Lily's eyes. She was standing there in her raincoat, hood up, trembling from more than cold. I'll be back before midnight, he promised, but she shook her head. No, they know about me. You said they watch people. Her voice was thin, cracking. Don't leave me here alone, please, Daddy. The plea struck deeper than he expected. Nora stood near the cruiser, pretending not to listen, but her jaw tightened. She can stay in the car, Daniel whispered to her. Doors locked. She doesn't move. Nora gave a curt nod. Only because this isn't a normal night. Lily climbed in beside Ranger, who refused to be left behind. Daniel didn't fight it. He needed the gelding tonight as much as he needed the badge on his chest. The convoy of 3 cruisers crawled along the muddy road toward Willow Ridge, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. Ranger stood in the trailer behind them, steady despite the shaking ground. The ridge rose ahead, dark and hulking, its silhouette jagged against flashes of lightning. Daniel gripped the wheel harder. Every mile tightened something in him he couldn't loosen. They parked half a mile shy of the compound, engines silenced beneath the roar of the storm. The air smelled of wet earth and rusted metal as their boots hit the mud. Ranger stepped from the trailer with surprising purpose, ears locked forward, each stride deliberate. He wasn't unsure. He was leading, as if he'd walked this path in another life. The compound emerged through the curtain of rain, tarps snapping in the wind, shadows moving behind corrugated metal. Dim lanterns burned under a makeshift awning. Nora gestured for her team to split, her voice barely audible above the storm. Wait for my signal, she mouthed. But Ranger had already caught something on the wind, muscles coiling as he lifted his head high. A sudden crack echoed through the night, a door slamming open, followed by a yell. A man bolted from the shadows, sprinting toward the barn with a crowbar in hand. Daniel recognized him instantly. Mason Briggs, one of the names whispered around the old ranch. He lunged toward a chained stall, shouting orders to someone inside. Move 'em! Now! Before Daniel could react, Lily stumbled from the cruiser door she cracked open, drawn by the panicked cries of horses inside the barn. Lily! Daniel shouted, but his voice was swallowed by thunder. Ranger broke into a limping gallop, charging ahead of her, cutting a path through the mud. The sight hit Daniel like a punch, horse and child running toward danger in a single silhouette. Mason spun toward them, arm raised, something glinting in his hand, a knife. Lily froze, mud splashing around her boots. Ranger lunged without hesitation, slamming into Mason's side with a force that sent both man and weapon flying. Mason hit the ground hard, cursing through the rain as the knife skittered into the dark. Daniel reached them seconds later, pinning Mason with a knee as he slapped cuffs on his wrists. Inside the barn, chaos took shape. Crates overturned, ropes hanging from beams, frightened horses kicking against their stalls. Logan and Nora rushed in, securing 2 more men who had tried to escape through a back door. The storm raged around them, But something steadier cut through the noise. Ranger standing guard over Lily, body shaking, breath hard, yet unmovable. Daniel pulled his daughter into his arms, soaking wet, but alive. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice rawer than he meant it to be. Lily shook her head, tears mixing with rain. "He saved me," she whispered, looking at Ranger with a kind of reverence. Daniel turned toward the gelding, swallowing a knot of emotion. "He did more than that," he said. "He remembered." Ranger stepped back, favoring his injured leg, but his eyes were bright despite the storm's fury. He looked toward the rear of the barn, where a rusted cart sat partly covered by a tarp, its wheel splattered with the same pattern Daniel remembered from the canyon wreck years ago. The same cart, the same men, the final piece of a long buried truth, and Ranger had led them straight to it. Morning came slow to Redwood Springs, the storm clouds finally peeling away to reveal a soft, washed clean sky. Daniel stood at the kitchen window with a mug of coffee that had gone cold in his hands. The yard outside looked different now, calmer somehow, like the ground itself had taken a long breath after the night's violence. Ranger grazed near the fence, moving carefully, but with a steadiness that eased the knot in Daniel's chest. In the barn, Star rested beneath warm blankets, one ear twitching when Lily entered. She carried a small bowl of mash Maria had mixed with medicine, her steps quiet, almost ceremonial. "You're safe now," she whispered, brushing her fingers down the foal's neck. The words had become a kind of prayer for her. Once she'd spoken twice now, once to Ranger, once under the bridge, and both lives were still here because of it. Sheriff Nora Grant dropped by just before noon, boots still muddy, expression sharp but satisfied. "They're all in custody," she said, handing Daniel a folder. "Mason, Travis, the others, and the DA's thrilled with the evidence. You gave them a case they can't wiggle out of." Daniel nodded, but his attention drifted to the open paddock where Ranger lifted his head at the sound of their voices. Nora followed his gaze. "That horse led us straight into the truth," she said quietly. "I've seen dogs do that. Never a horse." Daniel exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "He's been trying to tell someone for years," he murmured. "We were just the first who listened." Nora touched his arm, voice turning gentler. "Then keep listening." By afternoon, neighbors started showing up, some curious, some offering help after the news about Willow Ridge spread through town. A retired carpenter dropped off spare lumber. A ranch wife delivered a stack of old saddle blankets. Mrs. Rowley, with her steel-gray bun and sharp tongue, brought fresh-baked biscuits for Lily and a bag of grain for Ranger. "Every good soul deserves a soft landing," she declared, patting Ranger's shoulder. Daniel spent the hours hammering boards into place, repairing the paddock, turning the old barn into something sturdier. Each step felt like setting a stone where a bridge used to be broken. Lily helped paint the new wooden sign she'd been dreaming about. Blue letters, uneven but brave, "Haven for Hooves." Star watched from his stall, Ranger from the shade of a cottonwood, as if both of them understood this was being built for more than just them. Logan arrived near dusk, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets, uncertainty in his eyes. "They're reopening my sister's case," he said quietly. "Said your evidence links the ranch to the night she died." Daniel laid down his tools. "You deserved the truth," he said, "and she deserved justice." Logan's throat tightened. He glanced toward Ranger. That horse, he tried to save her. The wind carried the faint rustle of the trees, and Ranger stepped closer, lowering his head toward Logan in a gesture impossibly gentle for an animal who'd seen so much cruelty. Logan touched the gelding's muzzle, blinking back the ache in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. It wasn't clear whether he was speaking to Ranger or to Daniel or to the memory of someone he'd loved, but the words felt right in the quiet. That night, after the last visitor left and the yard settled into its soft nighttime hum, Daniel tucked Lily into bed. She clutched her favorite stuffed horse, the one missing an ear. "Is Ranger gonna be okay?" she asked. Daniel brushed a hand over her hair. "He will," he said. "He's home now." Lily smiled drowsily. "We're home too." The truth of that settled deeper than he expected. Daniel stepped outside, letting the door click softly behind him. Moonlight stretched across the yard like a silver ribbon. Ranger stood on the rise near the fence line, head turned toward the dark silhouette of the ridge. Not tense this time, just watchful, like a guardian standing his last quiet shift. Daniel approached slowly, resting a hand against the gelding's neck. "I found something in the evidence box," he murmured, pulling a small tag from his pocket, worn, metal, engraved with a single word, Compassion Unit, Ranger. It had belonged to the horse years before, when he'd been part of a rescue team, before someone sold him into the wrong hands. Daniel fastened it gently to Ranger's halter. "You earned this a long time ago." Ranger exhaled, a soft, warm sound that brushed against Daniel's sleeve. The gelding lowered his head, leaning into him, with a trust as solid as the earth beneath them. Behind them, Star whinnied softly from the barn. Lily murmured in her sleep, and the Hayes house glowed with the quiet warmth of a family mended by something larger than themselves. Sometimes, Daniel thought, miracles don't arrive with sirens or angels. Sometimes they limp through the rain with scars and old memories, carrying truths no one else was brave enough to face. Sometimes they come with hooves, and sometimes, if you're lucky, they choose you. That night, under the calm glow of the moon, Ranger stood watch over the place he'd finally been. Allowed to heal, a place built from second chances, from love stronger than fear, from a girl who whispered a question in a parking lot and changed everything. And for the first time in years, the shadows of Red Canyon stayed exactly where they belonged, behind them. If this story touched your heart even a little, I'd love to hear from you. Just drop a simple 1 in the comments to let me know you're here. Or 0 if this was your first time watching our channel. Your comment, no matter how small, helps our stories reach more people who need a little hope today. And if you'd like to join us for more stories of courage, kindness, and the quiet miracles hidden in everyday life, please subscribe and stay with us. We've got many more journeys waiting for you. And I promise the next one will stay with you long after the screen fades.
If this story touched you the way it touched us, let me know with the simplest comment possible. Just type 1 if you felt hope, or narrow if it left you speechless.